Hello and welcome to the first devlog in a brand new series for a game that I am really excited to build. But before we get to the project, I want to say thank you. Since releasing Blink and finishing up its video series, this channel has grown immensely. I've seen a huge influx of new viewers and subscribers, which is amazing, but even better than that is the number of comments I'm seeing from people who are inspired to try and live a more productive and healthy life and make progress on their own projects. So I just want to say thank you all so much for the support, and I hope you'll stick with me as I start from scratch on this new project. Since starting Blink and this channel at the beginning of the year, I've had two primary goals: to have fun learning to develop video games and to inspire other interested folks to do the same. Briefly, in one of my live streams earlier this year, I mentioned a third goal. You may already be able to tell that I'm a pretty big fan of the outdoors based on almost all the B-roll I show in my videos. As I've started to grow a larger audience, I've recognized an opportunity to combine my appreciation of the outdoors with my passion to create games in order to at least try to do something for the good of our planet. I had already planned for most of my games to be set in nature, just as Blink was. I want to stay true to that in my new projects, but with each game, I want to try and gently nudge the player's attention towards an issue affecting the Earth. To explain what I mean by that, it's probably best just to announce what I'm going to be doing for my next project. For now, I'm calling it Polar. It's a game about a polar bear who falls asleep one night on a chunk of ice next to the sea and wakes up somewhere completely different. The ice he was resting on has melted and floated to the south, and you'll be helping him travel north to get back home. What I aim to draw the player's attention towards here, at least to some degree, is global warming and the adverse effects it has on life in the Arctic. But I want to be clear that this game is not going to be about global warming. I don't want to guilt my players or try to jam a bunch of educational material down their throats. What I want to do is have this just be a theme in the background, such that, if it even makes one player a little bit more mindful about the impact they have on our planet, I think it's just going to be a huge positive and definitely worth it. So that's the direction I'm headed in. I hope you guys are as excited as I am for this new project. Time to start working on Polar. It is Thursday afternoon, just after 5 o'clock. I had a long day today, early start at the gym, and then just kind of a long day at work. But I am home now, and I'm ready to kick off development of Polar. That said, it is a beautiful day outside today, and I feel like it's getting dark pretty early these days, so I'm actually going to kick off my Thursday by just heading outside and having a drink on the balcony. Should help get the creative juices flowing anyway. Just about 6 o'clock now, and time to get started on Polar. Now, I know I haven't told you guys much about the gameplay, and I'm not really going to. I'm hoping this video will kind of speak for itself as the prototype comes along. What I will tell you now is that I'm going to start Polar very much the same way I started Blink, by creating some placeholder artwork for my prototype. Now, the big difference here is that Blink was a 2D game and I was learning pixel art, and Polar is going to be a 3D game, and I will be learning 3D modeling with Blender, and specifically I'm going for a low poly art style. So that means tonight I'm going to be learning a little bit of Blender and creating a low poly polar bear. Let's try it out. Well, after a decent amount of blood, sweat, and tears, I have my very first handcrafted 3D model. And of course, this is our low poly polar bear. There's still obviously a ton of work to be done here as I develop these skills a bit more. There's like way too much geometry in his face, and he's a bit thick in some areas, and he is just overall needs a lot of improvement. But I'm really happy with what I was able to achieve here in kind of my first hours ever playing with Blender. It's just after 7 o'clock now and time to go work on dinner. I had a lot of fun making that model tonight, and even though I've got a long way to go, I'm just really happy with how it turned out, and I think having that model is going to make prototyping a lot more fun. Next steps are going to be to figure out how to get that model into Unity and to start writing some code. I'll catch up soon. Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Saturday afternoon. I've got about 3 hours of free time right now, so I'm hoping I can just make a bunch of progress on this prototype. My overall goals for the remainder of this devlog are to finish up sculpting my bear here, to give him some very, very rudimentary animations in Blender, which I need to learn how to do, and then to get this model and those animations into Unity, figure out how to kind of make all those work, and finally program some basic controls to see how we're going to end up controlling this player character. Yesterday I made some more tweaks to my bear model, as you can probably tell. I think overall his shape is a lot better, he's got more rounding around his legs, and his head looks a whole lot better. I got rid of a bunch of unnecessary geometry, and what am I doing here? I think he just looks a lot cleaner there with the nose. Speaking of his nose, if we go to the shading tab here, you can see that he's white and he's got a black little nose. So I think he actually looks pretty good. I'm excited to get some animations going and see what he looks like in Unity. Alright, so after not too much time at all, I've already got a nice little animation for my bear. I just wanted to learn how the system worked in Blender, and it turns out it's a lot like my video editor. Basically down here you have this dope sheet where you set keyframes for various properties of the bear that change over time. You can see that I've given my bear a handful of bones here for his spine, and basically I'm moving those bones around and setting keyframes to determine where those bones should be, where their transforms should be at certain periods in time. So if we go ahead and play this animation, you can see we've just got a goofy little rotation and location change to make it look like he's bouncing up and down. It looks a lot like Equilinox. That's kind of where I got the inspiration for this quick animation. Of course, this is going to be improved into an actual walk probably quite a bit later once I feel more comfortable with the animation system, but for now, this will give me something to play with in Unity. Almost all my work so far on Polar has been in Blender, and I've learned so much over the past few days. It's amazing software. But now that I have my placeholder art created, I'm really excited to get into Unity and create my first scene. Let's do it. So after a little time spent goofing around with my first scene, this is what I'm left with. I got the polar bear here, and of course I now have a platform for him to walk across. If I go ahead and tap play, you'll see that he kind of drops and begins to slide across the platform. I am not controlling him as a kinematic rigid body. I want physics to be applied to him, and that's something that's going to hold true throughout gameplay. So I'll go ahead and give you a little tip about how I did that. Normally, if you just apply a force and these two things collide with each other, the friction is going to prevent a lot of movement. So what I had to do was create a physics material for this player and change the friction values to 0. So once I did that for both the player and the ground, that resulted in the two rigid bodies being able to collide and the slide can just happen. Now over here in my player script, rather than actually manually moving the player's transform as I would if he were a kinematic rigid body, instead I'm just applying a force here. And I'm doing this only at the start because if I did this over update, he would accelerate. I don't want him to accelerate. I just want him to have a constant velocity. So with 0 friction between him and the ground, I can apply this force to start off with, and it gives him a nice little starting velocity. This, of course, is still looking pretty bad right now because he just drops and slides and moves right off the screen. So we're going to work on two things next. The first is getting the camera to track the player as he moves across the scene, and the second is getting that animation that I made in Blender to play while he's moving. Alright, did not take too much time at all to get this working. So now I've got a camera that follows my bear, and of course as he's moving from left to right, he's kind of bouncing around. And I'll go ahead and show you how I achieved that. Both of these things are really easy to do. So first off, the camera, if we move over here to my editor, you can see that I've got a camera controller script that I've created, and it's very brief. First thing I have is a public target. That's the game object that we want the camera to follow. And then we have a private camera offset, which we're going to be calculating here in start. Now what this is doing is just calculating the offset from the camera to our target just here in the Unity scene. So it's calculating kind of this distance here between these two objects because my player is the target, which I have set right here in the inspector. So once we have that offset, during an update, we can basically just change the transform of the camera based on our target's transform plus that offset. We obviously don't want these to be exactly the same because the camera would then be right on top of the bear. So if I go ahead and play, again, you can see that the camera is following the bear with whatever offset we had at the start here. If I move the camera like way up here and play, that offset will remain there. So that worked out pretty well. Just a couple lines of code to get that working. Hopefully that is helpful to anyone who's setting up something similar. The animations for my little polar bear took me a little bit longer to figure out, so I'll go ahead and show you how I did that in case any of you guys are stuck on this as well. What we want to do is go into our Project Explorer here and head to our Blender file. And if you created your animations in Blender as I did, you should see in the import settings, if we go to the animations tab, you should see any animation actions that you created. Of course, the walk one is what I'm interested in. If we go ahead and select that, we can hit play down here in the bottom right, and see a little preview of our animation, which is great. However, that doesn't just kind of pre-play right out of the box. I had to set a little bit of something up here on my player object. So if we click on that, this animator component was already on this game object when I dragged the Blender file up into my scene hierarchy. So Unity was smart enough to create that for me. What it didn't have was a player animation controller, so I had to create that. Now if I go ahead and open up this animation controller that I created, what you pretty much start out with is this any state and entry point. And what I did was right click and say create state, and I created a state for my walk cycle. And then up here in the inspector, there's an item from motion. I went ahead and clicked this little circle here, and I was able to select between the two animations that Unity automatically imported from Blender. Once I had that set up, I dragged my animation controller into the animator on my object, and because walk cycle is connected to the entry point, the animation fires right up. So I had to do a couple things that I wasn't quite familiar with to get this working, but now that it's all set up, it's running smoothly. Well, at this point, I couldn't really help myself, and I wanted to try and spruce up my prototype scene. So I added some pre-existing low poly forest assets that I got from Reddit. This lovely person called Quaternius Dev posts some really cool free assets on here. This is a post from 3 months ago where they provided all these wonderful low poly nature assets for free. So I'll leave the link for this in the description. I was able to just drag these straight into my Unity project and pop them into my scene. If we go back to my scene here, I'll go ahead and hit play. And you can see just how cool this looks with the bear kind of moving alongside the rocks and the trees. This gives me a lot of hope for how aesthetically pleasing this project might be in the future. Now you've probably figured this out already, but my vision for the core of Polar's gameplay is to have the player move from left to right towards the end of the stage constantly. It's going to be your job to guide him there by jumping, attacking, sliding, dashing. I want to have really tight controls for Polar, and I want you to be able to destroy enemies, collect pickups, and I want to have stage completions be timed so that you can go back and try to beat your time on subsequent attempts. You're going to be traversing handcrafted environments, so it's not going to be an endless runner, and your goal as you play is going to be to make your way through multiple different environments to try and find your way back home to the north. I hope you guys have enjoyed this first devlog. On Wednesday we started with absolutely nothing, and now on Saturday afternoon I have my first 3D model, my first 3D animations, and my first 3D scene that I've ever put together, which is super exciting. I know a lot of what I did might seem pretty rudimentary to you more experienced game developers out there, but this was all new to me, and I'm just super excited to make so much progress in the first week. As always, I really want to hear what you guys think of both the concept of the game and if you have any ideas for certain gameplay mechanics you'd like to see in Polar. Just like Blink, I know Polar is going to be better if I implement suggestions from you guys, the community. So we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. As always, let me know what you thought with the thumbs, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.